All right, out here tonight, I'll be putting in some more brassica plots. Last night I was able to get in about half my brassicas here, and we just got a good dose of rain this morning. So here's a quick look at what this buckwheat looks like in our black ground swamp field, our wettest food plot. You can see there's a lot of weed pressure in here. A lot of this is almost all water hemp. And it's really hard to see how tall this stuff really is. You can see the corn over there. I mean, it's like almost as tall as the corn. I mean, this stuff's all 4 foot to 5 feet high across this whole plot here. This stuff had plenty of moisture in this lower ground plot. So just like last night, I got a good mix of my two favorite brassica blends, Antler King's Honey Hole and Whitetail Institute Wintergreens. And all those brown seeds in there are, again, the tillage radish. I tried to get a good 1/3 mixture of everything. This might be slightly heavy on the tillage radish, but that's okay. Like I said in all my brassica videos, those tillage radishes, man, you gotta plant them with your brass. If you're not planting tillage radish with the rest of your brassicas, you're screwing up, because it's by far the most attractive brassica, September and October, kind of early season. And they'll, then once it gets frosted out or eaten up, they'll just move right onto the kale and forage rape varieties. And then obviously the turnips usually aren't touched until usually December, January, even February. So got a good mix of everything right here. When you're walking through here and seeding this, like in your mind, you're thinking, there's no way this is going to work. I mean, look at how tall these weeds are and stuff. But over the years, I mean, I found this to be the best method to end up with the least amount of weeds in my plots here, because I got such dark, weedy ground soil. I got one other little plot up there I plan on doing yet tonight too. But let's just take a quick look at what our seeding population looks like. I mean, the buckwheat was in here super thick, but you can see these seeds just sitting on top of the soil down here. This is what you want. You can't really do this if you got a thick rye thatch layer or a thick grass layer. See right there, it's almost a little too thick. See all them seeds? I don't see nothing right here. Maybe a tillage radish seed there. You don't quite get the best seeding coverage in this tall stuff. It's kind of hard, but it looks pretty good just by the couple areas I've checked. And I should get darn near 100% germination. There's more rain coming on Friday, so. Well, that worked out a lot better than what I thought. This is just one pass. I thought some of these water hemp and giant ragweed plants would have stood back up a little bit more, but those other plots I was doing last night, they had a little bit shorter weeds, like kind of waist high to knee high weeds, and those would spring back up. But these chest to head high weeds, once they get that tall, they kind of just stay down. Plus this stuff was super thick. It just, the overall amount of stems and just the amount of leaf cover, once I crushed through it, just wasn't thin enough to spring back up, I guess. I don't know, it worked really good. There is a lot of weeds in here still, like this right here. But I'm thinking when I spray this, if I can get like 1 or 2 droplets to hit the stem right here of the plant, maybe that'll have a better chance of killing it. All right, here's plot number 2. This kind of wraps around those trees back there. It's kind of an odd-shaped plot. You can see the deer have a little trail going right through the buckwheat here. Some fresh tracks. Normally they don't like walking through the buckwheat that much, but this is one of their main areas coming out towards these fields. So they come through this area a lot. This is not quite as dark of a ground. Food plot is just right down there, literally a couple 100 yards is the other area I just did. I mean, it looks pretty dark right now because it's wet kinda, but there generally isn't quite as many weeds in here, but actually it does look like there's quite a few. But this is like some sort of pigweed. This isn't a water hemp. This is very similar, and there's more lamb's quarters here. That's what these are. And you see how these are shorter weeds? They're only about knee high. These ones are gonna spring back up, and it's gonna be harder to crush them. I'll see what I can do. I'm not gonna get any video of seeding this. My phone's almost dead. All right, so back out here to this long, narrow strip along the edge of this corn here. And yeah, they're probably a little thicker than what they should be, the brassicas. We got some water hemp coming back. Not a ton of it is really coming back. I actually got a surprisingly good kill. See a lot of these big weeds snapped off, and now they're like side sprouting kind of like a tree would and producing a little bit of seed. But yeah, the brassicas are coming up. There's definitely some new weeds popping up as well. See all these little ones? This is all like water hemp and some Piers Lane. Piers Lane is this crawling type of weed here, but I mean, the cultipacker this ground was so loose, the cultipacker might have, wow, that's hot. That's just like baking, that black dirt. It's roasting. But the cultipacker might have worked up like the first ½ inch to maybe even 3/4 to an inch of soil, so maybe that's why. And turning around here, and that loose soil works up a little bit with the cultipacker. Maybe that's why we got a little bit of new seeds coming up, new weeds. For some reason, this side over looks a little thicker, and then this side over to the corn looks a little thinner. I don't know what would cause that. Maybe I just I don't know, walked a little bit closer to each other right here. I think I did like either 3 or 4 passes when I was planting it with the broadcast seeder. But yeah, this side looks a little better on the spacing. Oh, this whole area looks actually pretty good right here, but back that way you can see how thick that is. But I mean, if there's any brassica plot that I would want to have too thick, it'd probably be this plot because there's so many weeds coming in. If I can get canopy closure on these brassicas, you know, then the smaller the weeds will get this year. I know last year when I had the brassicas in this field going down this way, I had all the rows of corn going this way. I had a strip of brassica in there. I had them planted a little bit pretty similar in thickness like this, and they did fine. They didn't really choke out or turn yellow or anything. So I think these are gonna do good. So I'll update you one more time probably in this video at least. So I'll take you up to that other little plot right up there on the other side of that corn. Well, here we are. This is the black walnut food plot. I don't know what happened. There's like very little brassicas coming up, especially out in this full sun area. I mean, you can see we got some here. And we did fertilize this earlier this year when we planted the buckwheat. You can see we got a pretty good kill on the weeds. There's a few weeds coming back. But man, these brassicas are pretty sparse in here, which is totally fine because I mean, these things will get pretty big if the weeds don't fill in really bad, being so thin like this. But for being no-till, I mean, this is a little bit drier plot here, and the ground usually doesn't work up as bad when you drive over it and pack it all down. You can see some areas might have been, some of the areas the dirt might have been churned up a little bit from the cultipacker, but you can see it, there's a ton of weeds coming back, surprisingly. So I'm thinking I probably went over it too many times where I actually disturbed the soil or something. But yeah, I must have just didn't quite seed as thick enough as I should have in this plot. Because you look all around, I mean, I'm not seeing hardly anything right here. I mean, right here's some, but they're really small. I guess this whole plot is pretty shaded, so that's gonna factor in too. You come over to this side, kind of the same thing. Pretty sparse, pretty small brassicas. this buckwheat in here was actually really good. There was very few weeds in here. So I'm surprised that these brassicas aren't coming in better. This is probably my worst looking brassica plot so far this year. This section right here. They're just really thin and there's not much coming. But in the long term, maybe this will end up being one of the better stands because they're so thin. These brassicas will have plenty more room to grow. I don't know. They're just getting a little bit slower start. You see out here in this full sun, they're looking a little better and a little thicker too for some reason. I mean, it'll still turn into a good brassica plot, and I probably plan on coming in here with rye and planting rye in September as well, just to have a nice green carpet in here for the deer to munch on. Yeah, we'll see you in a couple weeks. I'll update you on this plot and that first spot I was just at. Well, here we are, doing the final update on this brassica section. I'll take you up there to the next little brassica spot here in a little bit. But yeah, it's coming in real nice. So as you see, this is that long strip that was all 5 or 6 foot tall buckwheat and weeds. And like I said in the last update, it looked like some of this in here was a little bit thick, a little bit thicker than I wanted it to be. It looks like the forage rape and kale, like all this has really came in. A lot of these tillage radish are actually kind of small. Normally the tillage radish comes in the fastest and is usually the biggest. But you can see a lot of this stuff is probably a little bit thick, but man, it doesn't look like it's suffering from any nutrients deficiency, so I think I'm gonna be all right. Sometimes when the brassicas get thick, you know, they'll start turning yellow, maybe even brown, and you know, they're not gonna be attractive to deer when they're, you know, really looking ugly, because it's just the palatability is not gonna be there and the attractability. So I think this will turn out all right. You can see we got lots of water hemp in here still. Some of this is probably new stuff that sprouted back, and some of it is stuff, the big stuff that I crushed that didn't, you know, die from the spray. Up there in that next plot, you can see that ground is not quite as black, not quite as loose. This is pretty much just straight loam peat ground. So it's loose like this all the time. I mean, you'd have to have a layer of grass here or something, or multiple years of not planting for it to get like a sod layer established where it's not so loose like this. You drive over it a couple times, it just works in the seed perfectly, but that disturbs the soil every time you drive over it. Even packing it down, no-tilling, disturbs the soil on this loose ground. That's why we got such good germination here. You can see up when I take to the next plot, like I said, it's a little bit drier, not as workable, not as loose a ground, and my germination rate was like way lower. So once the frost hits, it'll kill off all these weeds. This will just be a beautiful green runway right here for the deer. I mean, this is from that end to that end, it's probably 120 yards, but just a beautiful green food source right next to the corn here. So, I mean, right now the deer are really hitting this water hemp. There's more browse in the water hemp than there is in the brassica. All right, so here we are up in the drier plot. You can still see all the buckwheat right here, but you can see a lot more soil is still exposed because there just wasn't as many weeds that came up, wasn't as many brassicas that came up, because like I said, the soil is definitely, it's a different type of soil here, not as black, not as like a peat ground, so it didn't get churned up as much when I packed it down and drove over it a bunch. So therefore we got probably, you know, less germination on the brassicas and less germination on the weeds. So these brassicas are pretty far apart in here, and there still is obviously some weeds. You can see basically just the only weeds in here are water hemp, and that's pretty much the only weeds that was in here. Maybe some lamb's quarters. There was some sections in here that the lamb's quarters are real thick. Some of these weeds coming back, like you can see, this is a new one that just germinated, but some of this stuff might be like this bigger one here might have sprung back up. I guess that's another one that must have germinated, but yeah, it's not the end of the world. I'll come in here, I'll put a little bit of rye down in here to green this plot up a little bit to fill all these gaps in. This is probably the most sunny spot in the plot. And then you go up over this way. It's kind of the same thing, kind of sporadic. Not the best germination. And in certain areas, I mean, we got lots of weeds filling in right here. Well, lamb's quarters and whatever that is. Even back here, I didn't really get the best germination. This is starting to drop down into another low section down here. So this is a little bit more comparable to the other ground, the other food plot, the first one. You can see the stuff's a little darker here, but for some reason I've had better weed control in this plot than I had out there in the first spot. There just for some reason is less weeds here every year. And you can see there's hardly any brassicas coming in here, so I don't know what happened. I seeded this plot maybe slightly thinner than the first section, but not much thinner. And this is going to be one of the areas I come in here, and for sure back here I'll put in the rye real nice and thick. But out there in this open area, I'll put rye out there, but maybe not quite as thick as what I'll put it in back here. Yeah, hope you enjoyed this little video. Not the best results. The first plot obviously turned out better, but that whole plot out there is just, you know, better conditions for a food plot. More sunlight, less tree roots around. I mean, we got all these big trees around here. That's probably another reason why I can't grow as good of a plot back here as I did, I don't know, like 4 or 5 years ago when I first started planting this plot. I was able to grow like knee-high brassicas every year back here, but these trees are getting bigger and bigger. So yeah, I think let's just quick check out this side. I think these brassicas turned out a little better over here, a little bigger. So still pretty sporadic, but looks a little better over here. So yeah, this whole plot I'll probably seed in the rye pretty thick. It's really not that big, maybe 1/4 acre at most. But yeah, these brassicas are already getting munched on pretty good. So yeah,